My name is Jeff Ryland, the host of the Parenting Tips podcast for parents of young and school-aged children. We have just talked about adverse childhood experiences and the social determinants of health in the previous two podcasts. Both of those episodes discuss the scientific research and data that zeroes in on some pretty heavy details about the relationship between the environment our children grow up in and the health outcomes across their lifetime. It doesn't escape me that we were all children once. We, as human beings, are all on this journey. We all have been impacted by our environment. Way back in episode 4 about our social inheritance, I talked about blame. It's harder to blame previous generations when they did not know what we know today. It's harder to blame parents of the past when they were only doing what they knew. When I talk about it being harder to blame, I'm not suggesting that people who have been harmed by previous generations forgive and forget. That's not the purpose. It's my hope that this information leads to greater understanding. Whether it results in forgiveness or not, it creates a space in your hearts and minds where you carry less hurt and anger about the past. And now that we know better, we can do better. You've heard me quote Maya Angelou numerous times throughout this podcast series. It is intentional. Yes, we may need to acknowledge and maybe even look at how our past experiences have impacted our parenting, but we can also focus on the present moment to make changes into our children's future. There may be repair work to do because of past generations of mistakes with parenting, but we don't have to let that stop us from starting to change our parenting practices today. We can do two things at once. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the 5 protective factors that science tells us are essential in helping us raise healthy children. If you're able to, please take notes as we go along. You may discover that you're already doing some of what science tells us works. In fact, I know you are, because you're listening to this podcast series. More on that later. Also, please check out the protective factors links in the show notes for more information. When I began teaching classes on parenting, the motivation for teaching was the adverse childhood experiences data. However, the inspiration to continue to provide parents with solid resources informed by science to help raise their children has come from the knowledge of the protective factors that can buffer children from some of the harmful effects of that adversity. There is so much depth here. When parents know more and feel more confident in their parenting skills, when they know how to teach skills to guide their children to be more socially and emotionally competent, and when they know how to engage the larger social network of the community, the family and friends to help raise their children, remember, it takes a whole village, then they're actually using 4 or more of the 5 protective factors we'll be talking about. Learning about and using more effective parenting begins this positive cascade of increased confidence in your parenting skills and better outcomes for children. We know that bad things happen. Some bad things are preventable. Many bad things are not. Children have very little say in what impacts their lives and their developing brains. Things like parents arguing, a bad separation or hostile divorce, growing up in poverty, witnessing violence, living in unsafe neighborhoods, dealing with a parental mental illness or addiction, a parent's absence or incarceration. All of these things have one thing in common. They are not good for children. Thankfully, while bad things can shape our life experiences, bad things do not define us. In this episode, we will explore the 5 protective factors, things that buffer children from some of the bad things they have no control over. In the next episode, we'll take a deeper dive into resilience, a wonderful quality that can be grown in children to help them thrive. The first protective factor is parental resilience. Strengthening Families was developed by the Center for the Study of Social Policy. According to Strengthening Families, parents are resilient when they're able to manage stress and respond and adapt to challenges, to adversity, and to trauma. As we have talked about several times in this podcast series, parenting is hard work and it can be stressful. We cannot always anticipate what the challenges will be that come our way. Yet we have to figure out how to respond to them. A parent's ability to bounce back is considered a protective factor. Studies show that how a parent responds to stress is more important in determining the outcome for children than what the actual stressor might be. In other words, the stressor or bad thing that happens does not define you or the outcome. How a parent responds is more important. It is possible that you engage in resilient behaviors every day. For example, you sometimes call a sibling, a parent, a friend for guidance or advice or to help out. When you do this, you are demonstrating resilience. There are times when problems can seem overwhelming or insurmountable. Remember, it takes a village. Some challenges and stressors are not easily solved. Living in safe neighborhoods or better housing may take time. Managing a child's emotional and behavioral challenges that often accompany neurodevelopmental problems that are chronic require daily attention, sometimes hourly and minute-by-minute attention. When parents can stay positive, have confidence that they and their children will get through the rough patch, they are more likely to succeed. As you consider your own resilience, you might want to think about some of the questions posed by strengthening families. Where do you draw your own strength? How does this help you in parenting? What are your dreams for yourself and your family? What kinds of worries and frustrations do you deal with during the day, and how do you solve them? How do the people around you support you? And what do you do to take care of yourself? When a parent has resilience, they are more able to use problem-solving skills, cope with stress, engage in self-care strategies, and use help-seeking behaviors, including support for their own mental health or substance abuse issues. The second protective factor is the family social connections. Social connections are those positive relationships that provide emotional, informational, instrumental, and spiritual support for the parents and the children in the family. We human beings are social people. We need each other. It is essential for our very survival. Social connections are at their best when parents feel emotional support. If they're frustrated with some behavior or situation involving their child or children, they know who they can turn to for help. Parents are more likely to learn and grow as parents if they feel heard and not judged. All parents make mistakes. If a parent already struggling is met with raised eyebrows, disdain, or feels judged, they'll continue to feel isolated. Parents do better when they have informational support. When parents have access to high-quality resources that guide them in parenting practices and activities, as well as resources available in the community for they and their children, including places to go for help, like the Parenting Resource Center, they do better. Parents do better when they have instrumental support. This means that they have those simple but important things that we can sometimes take for granted, like reliable transportation to get children to and from school and appointments, or to go to the grocery store. Instrumental support also means parents having access to internet services to effectively communicate with schools, to schedule medical appointments, and to connect with financial resources or find links for jobs they might qualify for. Finally, parents do better when they have spiritual support. This does not necessarily mean they attend church regularly, but it can. It may also mean that they have a sense of connection to a higher power, a community of like-minded people who they can rely on, or a belief that things will get better. They may have a belief in themselves and a promise for their future. These are the kinds of support that, when present, tend to help parents when they are responding to their children. When parents feel supported through their social connections, they tend to be more positive, more engaged, and more actively involved in parenting their children. Parents can ask themselves, do I have friends and family I can ask for help sometimes? Do I belong to any groups, clubs, churches, or service organizations? Who do I turn to for advice? Who do I vent to? Who do I seek out when I need to just talk? How often do I do this? Is it hard for me to make friends and trust others? What kinds of barriers get in the way? And what helps me feel connected to others? The third protective factor is knowledge of parenting and child development. The knowledge of parenting and child development helps parents to utilize strategies and parenting tools that support the physical, cognitive, language, social, and emotional development in children. When parents have knowledge of parenting and child development, kids do better. Have you ever wondered if your child's behaviors were normal? Maybe they are tantruming more than you expected, or they get stuck on the smallest things and they have a meltdown. When your 3-year-old has a small tantrum because you tore open a snack bag instead of cutting it with the scissors, is that normal? The answer is yes. They are still learning how to think flexibly. It's hard sometimes for parents to know because kids are like moving targets. Just when you think you figured out how to manage one behavior, they develop further and you need additional tools and knowledge. For young children especially, they cannot use words to tell you that you're right. Thankfully, there are excellent resources available for parents to better understand where their child is at developmentally. We discuss some of these resources in episode 6, Why Children Misbehave. Children grow in so many ways. We can measure their height and weight. We can keep track of how many words they're using, but it's harder to measure how successful children are in controlling impulses, delaying gratification or waiting, or regulating emotions and engaging in flexible thinking, perspective taking, and empathy. When it comes to raising healthy children, we know that all children need 3 things to survive. They need to live in a safe and secure environment where their physical needs are met. They need proper nutrition. And finally, they need a positive and consistent nurturing relationship with caregivers. In the United States, of those 3 essential things that children need, it is the third thing, a consistent and nurturing relationship with a caregiver, that is more likely to be absent if one is missing at all. When parents understand a child's development, it can guide them in their parenting practice. They can become more consistent and nurturing. Children who grow up with secure attachments to their caregivers are more likely to be able to form secure attachments in their adult relationships and in their future parent-child relationships. Questions a parent can ask themselves about parenting and child development include, what do you like about parenting? What do you find challenging about parenting? How have you learned your parenting skills? Have your skills changed and evolved over time? How? Why? How do you continue to learn about your child's development? What have you learned about yourself as a parent? And what worries do you have about your child's development or their behaviors? There are excellent resources about child development available online through the American Academy of Pediatricians and other reputable sources. These links are posted in the show notes. If you have concerns about your child's development or behaviors, a good starting point to learn more might be a conversation with their medical provider or a mental health professional. The fourth protective factor is concrete support in times of need. Families have concrete support in times of need when they have access to support and services that reduce stress caused by challenges. When a family's in crisis, maybe there's been an eviction, maybe a job loss, maybe a health care crisis with a parent or child. These things can feel pretty overwhelming. Who are the people and resources you can count on and turn to? How likely are you to reach out and ask for help? Who can you trust and rely on? Concrete supports are just that, concrete, solid. They are boots on the ground. They are those reliable individuals or agencies that will show up when needed. It may be a grandparent, a neighbor, a pastor, or a coworker. It may be someone to help you navigate through the red tape of paperwork for applications or services. It may be your child's teacher. The fifth protective factor is the social and emotional competence of children. Social and emotional competence of children occurs through the day-to-day interactions between children and parents that help children to develop the ability to express themselves clearly, communicate using words, regulate their emotions, and establish and maintain relationships. Strengthening Families identifies the following dimensions that describe social and emotional competence in children. Self-esteem, good feelings about oneself. Self-confidence, being open to new challenges and willing to explore new environments. Self-efficacy, believing that one is capable of performing an action. Self-regulation or self-control, following rules, controlling impulses, acting appropriately based on the situation. Personal agency, planning and carrying out purposeful actions. Executive functioning, staying focused on a task and avoiding distractions. Patience, learning to wait. Persistence, willingness to try again when first attempts are not successful. Conflict resolution, resolving disagreements in a peaceful way. Communication skills, understanding and expressing a range of positive and negative emotions. Empathy, understanding and responding to the emotions and rights of others. Social skills, making friends and getting along with others. And finally, morality, learning a sense of right and wrong. This is a nice list that describes many examples of the kinds of social and emotional skills that kids can achieve across time with practice and encouragement. According to Strengthening Families, questions you can ask yourself are, how is your relationship between you and your child? How do you help your child express their emotions? What situations are your child's emotions harder for you to deal with? If this is a protective factor area that you would like more guidance on, please consider checking out the podcast episodes related to self-regulation, building empathy, teaching patience, flexible thinking, problem solving, building friendships, and more. To recap, protective factors are those forces that can help buffer children from the negative effects of adverse childhood experiences. There are 5 factors you can assess for yourself that include parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete support in times of need, and social emotional competence of children. Take a moment and consider which of these protective factors are already in operation in your family's life. There is a chance that some of these factors are present. If this is the case, good for you and good for your family. Remember, protective factors don't erase adverse childhood experiences, but they can buffer or protect children from some of the harmful effects of ACEs. The stronger and more robust the protective factors, the better they can buffer your children. For more information about protective factors, check out the protective factors from the Alliance National Parent Partnership Council of the Children's Trust Fund on Strengthening Families. The link is in the show notes. These PDF flyers are available in English or Spanish. Thank you for tuning in and considering this parenting topic. I hope this information has added to your growing toolbox for parenting your child or children. Please consider exploring other topics in this series. Remember, no one parenting tool can do everything. We need many tools to become the best parents for our children. Your children's future depends on you and the time and effort you invest in them today.